but we're going to be recording this so that we can like send it out to the network and stuff like that. That's okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, I just wanted to check and make sure.
All right, we could just start in a minute if that sounds good, Catherine.
Okay, that's fine. Just let me know. Give me direction.
Okay. And then just what we decided we had talked about the last time, that's pretty much what we'll cover about just experience of working with Special Rapporteur in extreme poverty and through the entire process.
Okay.
And Josh is going to moderate, so I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. I don't know, except the fly.
That's what I figured.
You know, everybody's talking about that.
I know, I guess the flies stick around the cesspool. They just stick to.
Yeah, that's what everybody's been saying. Exactly. And then they were the other thing. Have you seen the Time magazine cover?
No.
It has COVID growing out of the White House.
Oh wow. They had
yeah.
That's appropriate.
Trevor Noah had it. He said the staff at the White House was welcoming Trump back. And
I'm letting Penelope in.
Okay.
Couldn't hear you. What was she saying?
She's letting Penelope in. But we can start. We'll start.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Aloha and welcome to Truth to Power Thursdays. We are exactly 1 month away from the Universal Periodic Review of the United States. On November 9th, the world will be looking at the Human Rights Circuit of the United States for over 3 hours. In this third Universal Periodic Review, it'll be very important for the voice of the people to be able to make sure that their recommendations are heard from the ground. One of the best examples of bringing a message from the ground to the global arena and sharing it in Geneva is Catherine Flowers. I'd like to welcome and thank her so much for making time to come and speak with us. She'll be sharing with us today about her experience with the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, and her experience of hosting the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty during a country visit, but also equally important, the follow-up in Geneva and some of the innovative examples that took place with the Guardian in a wider sense at the Graduate Institute, and continues to still influence the amazing work that she's doing. Catherine Flowers, I'd also like to embarrass her a little. She just was awarded the MacArthur Foundation, and I just want to say congratulations and thank you so much for making time to come and speak with us about your experiences. Mahalo, Catherine.
Thank you so much. Aloha. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be able to, to have this opportunity. COVID has had all of us, in self-quarantine pretty much. So it's good to be out there and interact, because COVID itself is just, it kind of illustrates why the human rights approach is so important. And the visit of the UN Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty to Lowndes County, I believe this is just part of that moment and why that was so important. So I guess I'll start by just explaining how, we got involved in this. We were initially involved with when the first UN Special Rapporteur when Katerina de Albuquerque, who was the UN Special Rapporteur on the human right to water and sanitation, visited the US. I had the opportunity to visit with her and give my testimony in Washington, D.C. So that gave me an opportunity to understand a little bit more about the human rights approach. And then we also, through this coalition I was a part of that was using the human rights approach to look at water and sanitation, we also gave testimony to a human rights body that represented the Americas. But I found out through a lot of those folks that I had met along the way, including Inga Winkler and Joanne Ward at Columbia, I found out about the visits of the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, that he was making his official visit to the US. And we decided to put together a letter requesting that he come to Lowndes County, Alabama. And I think what was significant about that letter is that people didn't see, and I don't think his office saw initially until we explained to him the connection between the raw sewage problem and poverty, especially extreme poverty. So we drafted the letter and sent the letter to his office requesting that he make part of his official visit, Lowndes County, and we got a response back saying that he would do it. And when and we were able to work with local people that lived in the community, because what we wanted him to do is to see firsthand what we were trying to explain for years, and people were not understanding us. But when he came, it was just prior to, I think it was in October of that year, it was 2017. We had just broken our story about tropical parasites being found in Lowndes County. And the writer that broke the story for The Guardian ended up being the same person that was part of his entourage when he came to Lowndes County. So he had a chance to see firsthand, Dr. Austin had a chance to see firsthand the situations in Lowndes County. He was very respectful of local folk. Some people did not want to be on camera, and he did not require that. In one case, there was a reporter who was pretty anxious because I know he was seeing something he had never seen before. Certainly didn't expect to see in the U.S. And he started, he started filming, and Dr. Austin stopped him. He stopped him. And I think when he did that, the resident that we were visiting gained more confidence and started telling him his story, which was very, very important to his visit. And then we went to a second site, and that particular site, there was an entourage of reporters accompanying him, including the one from The Guardian. And that particular reporter asked, had he ever seen this before? And he said that this is uncommon in the first world. So that in itself help us to understand that the wealthiest country in the world had these kinds of conditions. And the person, and although we had tried to articulate it, because I've been doing this since 2002, through Dr. Austin's eyes, using the human rights approach, not only was he better able to articulate what we've been trying to, but he was able to raise it to a global level.
I think that's important, and also that perspective, because when we see it on a daily basis, we can't imagine. But then when we get the visits from people from around the world, then it also puts perspective, and they can share, it isn't normal. This isn't the way it should be. And more importantly, that human rights-based approach shows what we as people are entitled to and the obligations of our government to the people. And I think that's a very important aspect. What were some of the recommendations that came from his report, or what were the impetus for those recommendations based on the places that you did take him around Alabama, that you could see it began to get him to consider those points?
Well, I think there were a lot of things that were going on like 2017, 2018 that provided I think perspectives on this, because we were in the initial report that he gave, and I think that was good, because when he left this area, he ended up in Washington, and I think one of the persons he may have met with was Bernie Sanders, because I got a call from Senator Sanders saying to me he wanted me to come to a town hall meeting that he was hosting in Washington, and he said, I want you to describe what Dr. Austin saw. So I knew that whatever Dr. Austin saw, he must have described it with such passion that it moved Senator Sanders, who invited me to come to this event that I eventually invited Senator Sanders to come to as well. I mean, he actually came to Lowndes County after that. But that was one of the things. And then the other thing that happened is that the President of the United States made that S-whole country statement about immigration. Is why do we have people coming here talking, why do we have people want to come here from these S-whole countries and not from countries like Norway, Of course, he was speaking from a stereotypical, point of view, but he was also it was also a racist statement to make, but it was disavowing what was happening here in the United States. And then the other thing that happened when we finally went to Geneva, that Nikki Haley left the UN Council, on Human Rights, and in her statement she called them a cesspool. So I remember that day when we were all there in Geneva, and Dr. Austin was getting ready to present his report, and he told me, he said, "Catherine, I want you to pay attention to what I'm saying because I'm getting ready to say something." And he started off his report by talking about Lowndes County. And basically what he said, which I think was the best recommendation he could have made, was, and as you make references to cesspools, he said, you should go see the cesspools that I saw in Lowndes County, Alabama. And then he said, government, do your job. So, and that to me, I think is the simplest way to explain the human rights framework and how it works. And when he said this, there were nations there from around the world. There were also reporters there from around the world. If you remember, we went and had a lot of side meetings with reporters who actually did reports, and this became a global story. And then ultimately, we ended up going to the university, and I was one of the panelists there to talk about poverty, and Dr. Austin was a part of that panel as well. Dr. Liz Theo Harris was there, who's the co-chair of the New Poor People's Campaign, along with Reverend William Barber. And the same reporter who broke the parasite story for The Guardian, who also was with Dr. Austin when he came to Lowndes County, was the person who was the moderator for that panel in Geneva. So it all came full circle.
Yes, I'll never forget the meeting in Geneva, because that was the report was going to be presented. At the time the report was being presented, the evening before at 2 a.m, Nikki Haley and Pompeo said that they were leaving the Human Rights Council, were going to withdraw. And I believe they referred to the UN Human Rights Council cesspool from the bad governments who are participating in that. And so when they left, he said, of course, it's ironic that you mentioned cesspool with his witty Australian humor, because I saw so many of those just within walking distance from the Capitol there in Alabama. So I definitely remembered that as well. I thought that was a very powerful and witty point to the world. But then the other point that I thought that was so powerful was, even at many of those press conferences that I saw you do, we did press conferences during the lunch, and then also the side event the day before. Maybe you could share some of the main points that you brought from the ground there, and how those were then, received by the global arena. And then we can, of course, I think we can definitely look at that event at the Graduate Institute and a little bit later, because that was something innovative too. Normally, when a special rapporteur gives a speech, it's in that room 20 with the wild ceiling, and the people there hear it, but not everybody else hears it. But that new innovative event, by going on, having a press conference in a university setting with that, you had a huge audience coming to hear you speak. Maybe we could get into the side events and how you organized and participate in the side events, share more about the report, and then we'll get into that press conference, if that sounds good.
Yeah, well, I think that, what was so interesting about the reporters that were there is that, they were reporters, some were from the US. They had never, I think everybody was just shocked that we even had raw sewage on the ground in the United States, the wealthiest country in the world. Everybody was really, really shocked by that. And I think that I actually, even after I got home, I started to get calls from reporters from other parts of the world who wanted to interview me, who had seen or became aware of this issue because of the global coverage that we got in Geneva. I think, Josh, you're not really telling people that everybody knows you. So that's how we were able to do a lot of those events with reporters. And somehow we end up in rooms that we were end up in these rooms where that were set up hastily so we could could have those press conferences.
No, those are just the least we could do, especially with you making that trip all the way
Can
to
you
Geneva.
hear me?
Yes, we can. That was very sweet, but that's just what we needed to do to make sure that more people could hear your voice there and make sure that you were able to share your story with the widest media audience possible. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here because you were froze for a minute. My connection may be a little bit unstable.
We can hear you just fine. Keep going.
Okay. Well, it was really, and also I think it's important to mention that there were other people there from the U.S. that were present. There were representatives from the indigenous communities that were there as well. There were representatives from other organizations that were there that were with us, throughout the entire time, which made it, I didn't go by myself. Although I was there by myself initially, there was a team there to support me when I got there. And we were all together through the United States Human Rights Network. ACLU was also a big support effort. And Josh, that's where we met, there in Geneva, of all places. So it was a lot of, I think if you're at home and you're wondering, you're an activist and you're wondering, well, how can I navigate this? We did the work at home. When we got to Geneva, we had people to support us and who helped us through the process and helped me in a way that I had never been to Geneva before. I had never been in that kind of setting before, but I had people that were helping me and telling me what I needed to do, giving me advice, helping to make connections with the media or other meetings that we had. They were setting those meetings up for us. And I think that was very important, and whatever anxiety that I had about it before went away. And I've developed some lifelong friendships because of that. So here I am in a foreign country. And I have all these friends that are there that I didn't know before that were very supportive. And I think that that's one of the good things about the human rights community as well, is that there's a commonality and a shared respect that goes along with it that, you may not hear about it or read about just reading the reports itself.
I think that's a great point. The other aspect maybe we could talk about is if there's anything you wanted to add. I think the side event was great. The side events were really good because, as you said, we did have indigenous communities there. We had other people dealing with the issue of water and sanitation. And like you did say, everybody really quickly establishes a sense of solidarity because they see how it's the same story, just different parts of the country. And as well with the global audience that your speech resonated with, it was like, that's the same situation we face too. So we all have to tackle poverty, and that the human rights lens is a great way to move forward in that capacity, to make sure that all people's rights are respected and protected, and that the states fulfill their obligations under international law. And if you want to also share, how was that side event or the media event with The Guardian? Because that's honestly, that was a huge event for many people because they normally don't do things like that. And it was, I know, standing room only and everybody was there to hear. Maybe you can kind of share why that was such a new, innovative approach.
Well, that was my first time as well. And of course, to be at the university like that, first of all, it was broadcast around the world. So it wasn't just for the people that were there in the room. And also it's available if anybody wants to go look it up. You can actually go and see the actual broadcast is out there on the internet. And it gave us the opportunity. I had never been in that kind of setting before personally. So I wasn't shy, but I was trying to figure out, how to respond in that kind of setting. But I think I was able to hold my own eventually, but it was pretty intense. And there were people from the audience that were able to engage with us afterwards. There were other special rapporteurs that were there in the audience as well that wanted to make contact. So I think that for me, I was got to keep in mind I'm just an activist from Alabama who used to be a teacher. So here I am on an international stage, and I really did not. There's no way you can really prepare for that, but just do what you have to do. And I responded to the questions because I knew what they were, but I also knew, well, not in advance what the questions were, but I knew the answers because, you know, I came from that area. But I think it was also important to know that we are, that in that kind of setting, that you have to have, your facts, which we did have because we had to prepare for Dr. Austin's visit there. And it gave us a chance. I think what was even more important is that we had never we cast the wastewater problem as a human rights issue because we know it's part of the sustainable development goals to end poverty, but to cast it as being part of extreme poverty, and what made it even more of a contrast to talk about this being in the United States of America. I think that contrasted, but it also showed the irresponsibility of the government entities that were supposed to be addressing these issues. So yeah, and I think that it raised the caliber of it to the point that when I did go back home, that there were people calling from within EPA and other agencies that wanted to take action. There was a working group that was put together of all of the because at that time there was a working group that had been put together with all of these officials representing various parts of the federal government, and they decided to make wastewater their top issue.
Very cool. And I know, I think it's what's sort of showing here is a pattern of positivity, that one thing leads to another. So I know you also recently were asked to assist with the Sanders and Biden transition, and maybe you could share some of those things of still on the ground too, what you're doing there, but also on the national policy level, and how we're able to then navigate really from the community and cities to the capital of the country, and then still organizing now a lot with the global civil society as well.
Well, I think in terms of the policy efforts, what I try to do now is whenever someone is writing a policy that deals with water or wastewater, sometimes I advise in terms of the language, because sometimes the language is exclusive. In other words, it excludes rural communities, it excludes unincorporated areas. Even if they have funding available, people can't apply for it because if it says that the town has to have 12,000 or more people, that excludes a lot of people in Lowndes County. Or when you use the term town, it may not be a town. It might be just a community that's unincorporated. Should they be denied access to water and wastewater treatment because of that? No, and those are the kinds of things that we've advised on. I've actually worked with Senator Booker, who's actually just released some legislation dealing with this because this is also an environmental justice issue. I've had the opportunity to testify before a House subcommittee dealing with water and wastewater issues, and I testified about wastewater. And what was really interesting about that testimony is that the people that were there on both sides of the aisle, most people reflected on being in a situation where they had no wastewater treatment, or they were dealing with an outhouse, or in the case of the congressman that was there from New York, who said that he had the most rural district in New York, and they had wastewater problems too. I think that what we did with this whole experience was to take away the shame for talking about sanitation in the United States. Because I think that's been a major problem, is that people were too embarrassed to talk about this. And now, not only are we talking about it, we were talking about solutions, we were talking about policies, and even as part of the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force, I was able to influence some of the people that were on that task force to take into account wastewater when we talk about policies, and even if we're talking about how we're going to redo things and build back better, we have to look at wastewater as well, because it's been impacted by climate change.
That's the next point we're getting to, is the interconnectedness and intersectionality of all these issues. What could you maybe share a little bit about climate change and the climate crisis, and how that also links up with the issues that you work on and new initiatives that you're leaning towards?
Oh, could you repeat yourself?
Oh,
I
no
didn't
problem.
hear you.
I was asking, did you want to link up maybe a little bit about climate crisis and how these issues are interconnected and the intersectionality of them, and then how you're then moving forward to address these issues, understanding it from that holistic perspective, which also is part of the human rights framework?
Yeah, we have, this has actually been, you know, the connections, the intersectionality of this issue with so many other things have been um, just been profound. I've learned a lot myself through this issue. Climate change, even right now, you know, I live in the Gulf South, and we're having, we've had a record number of hurricanes here this year. I mean, climate change is real. And even right now, we've gotten to the point, we've gone through all the named hurricanes, and now we're dealing with Delta. And in my, you know, the most that will happen here right now, because I think Delta is targeted to probably hit Louisiana, which has a lot of environmental justice issues there. We've connected with communities there, especially in Cancer Alley, that are having a lot of problems with environmental justice and pollution, but also some of those areas also have wastewater problems too. And we have, and we've been talking to them about also using the human rights framework for addressing those issues. Because I think one of the good things about it is that we get a chance to share our lessons with our brothers and sisters that are out there doing this same kind of work. And they may not specifically focusing on wastewater, but they are looking at poverty, issues around poverty, and they're also looking at how they've been exploited as it relates to environmental justice. And I think maybe the next sustainable development goals should deal with environmental justice too. But we need to add that one. But that is, that's one part of the intersectionality. We also see that a lot of people here, I mentioned earlier, are impacted by COVID. In communities where you have raw sewage on the ground, I'm really concerned because we found that COVID does shed, feces can shed COVID. And I'm very concerned about those communities that don't have wastewater treatment, because, you know, some places are controlling COVID by testing the wastewater to see the extent of the infection in the area. But if you have it on the ground outside your house or coming into your home from the wastewater treatment that's failed from the entire town, that's not safe. And people are already debilitated by pre-existing illnesses, generally it's asthma or other kinds of illnesses that could be exacerbated by being exposed to wastewater. And we have, in this case, we're talking about raw sewage. So there's so much intersectionality there. And we've even had Al Gore to visit us because he understood the intersectionality between climate change and climate justice and environmental justice in this wastewater issue. Reverend Barber of the New Poor People's Campaign is actually going to visit because we know it's an issue of poverty, and that the people that tend to be impacted, whether they're Black people in Lowndes County or white people in Appalachia, is because they're poor. And the government don't pay attention to people that don't have any money. You know, if you're not in a particular income bracket, we saw this with the stimulus package. You know, if you're in a particular income bracket, you get a whole lot of money. But if you are a person who is just working, just trying to take care of your family and struggling every day, you get the minimal amount to keep you in that position primarily. But we have to structure government in a different way. And we have to structure government to serve the needs of the people. And I think the human rights approach is one of those things that we have, especially when we have unresponsive government. It's a tool that we have to be able to get them to do what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely. Maybe you could share with us some of the best results or improvements since using the human rights lens, and some of the aspects of signs of where we're going in the future. And then that'd be a great next step.
Well, I think that the biggest improvement is that people were ignoring us in the beginning. So now people are paying attention. And one of the things that we've realized that it's not just a problem of a personal failing of the individuals, and it's not a problem that you just fix by going and putting in a septic tank, because the septic tanks are not working. And what is happening is that people around the country are speaking out and they're connecting with us so we can find some real sustainable solutions, because the solutions that are being put forth now are not sustainable. They're short term and they're going to fail. And then with climate change, we're getting all this rain, for an example, that we're getting here. We know that whenever there's a storm that comes, whether it comes ashore in Louisiana or Texas, these storms are so big, we get a lot of rain. And our soil holds water. Some parts along the Gulf Coast, people are seeing sea level rise, increasing the groundwater table. We have a high groundwater table, high water table in Lowndes County anyway. It's higher now. So with these storms, it makes it worse. So part of the solution now, people are aware and know, they're paying attention, and they're sharing this information with scientists. There's letting, so that we can work on better technological solutions, because most of the people that are pushing for change or think they can come up with a device or something they can sell us to solve this problem, haven't actually spent the kind of time they need to spend to find out what the real problems are so they can deal with the solutions. That is starting to shift and change now. And even this recognition that I just received from MacArthur, one of the things that they looked at was the fact that I used a human rights approach in addressing this problem. When I was told that I won the award and they called me and they started reading, my bio that they had put together, that's one of the things that they talked about was how, inviting the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty to Lowndes County, because people don't do that. But I was fortunate enough to have some people advising me in my circle that, and it was one of the best things that we could have done for our issue, to get it out there and to be closer to solutions than we've ever been before.
Perfect. I'll stop there. We can open it up for questions if anyone else has some questions, and open it more into a broader conversation. And if there aren't, then I have a couple more questions, but I just wanted to, appreciate that first half hour and being able to get the full story about how you participated with the Special Rapporteur, what that's led to, and where the issue's at now, and potential avenues for advocacy into the future.
I do want to mention my book.
Definitely.
I haven't done it. So I have a book that's coming out that really talks in more detail about my experiences prior to learning about the human rights approach and my background as a civil rights advocate, and eventually, evolving. And the book is entitled Waste One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret. So the book will be published November 17th and is available through Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and there's also an independent bookstore link. But you can go to the New Press website and get information about it as well. So I think that anyone who's trying to figure out maybe some steps that I forgot to mention on this interview can actually go to the book, because I have a chapter dedicated to that.
Perfect.
I have a quick question, if nobody minds, and this may sound like a silly question, but I'm also involved in grassroots types of activities. So when you told the folks in your towns group, whatever, that a special rapporteur was being invited, A, did they have any clue what you were talking about? And B, how did you describe to them what that means?
Well, I think most people didn't know what a special rapporteur was. I didn't know at one point either. And, and I have a background in history, but I didn't know that. So I explained to them in very simple terms, one of the things that I've learned growing up in a rural community, especially after going away and getting an education, is that when I go back home, I have to be able to sit on the porch with mom and them and be able to talk in a way in which they can understand what I'm saying. So I've learned how to explain things in such a way where people trust me to tell them the truth, but at the same time, give them an understanding where they'll know what they're dealing with. So I explained to them what a UN Special Rapporteur was and that he was coming to, that he was making his official visit that he makes every so often, or she, to the US, and had been invited by the president to do it. And then I explained to them that he was going to make a report that hopefully members of the government here in the US would get a chance to read, and that he would make a report globally. And maybe that pressure would force the government to not ignore this problem anymore. So that is, and we also set some ground rules that they helped to set, and they were the ones that said who was willing to talk and who was not willing to talk on camera. They set the ground rules and said that we don't mind them filming, but we don't want our faces shown, or we don't want any identifying information, because still it is criminalized here. A person could go to jail for not having on-site sanitation. So we were, I've just, part of my organizing technique, it has been always, I guess because I'm from the area too, so a lot of it was just, organic, is to always sit down, take as much time as it takes to explain to folk and let them ask questions, and we get them involved and help them set the ground rules about how this is supposed to go. And that's why when I earlier told the story about the person started filming, because I had told Dr. Austin what the rules were too, and he stopped the guy. I didn't have to say anything. He stopped the guy and said, no, we're not going to do that. And I'm glad he did that, because then he respected the ground rule that was made by the person whose house he was visiting. And that made him trust them more.
That's
and
great.
he trusted them more information with.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for that question.
Yes, that's a big point. Part of even the Universal Periodic Review, if we said that there's going to be a review of the human rights in the United States, most people wouldn't imagine that that's actually happening, and who does that. And I think that's sort of what we do a bit, is demystify, but then show how people can participate. And the whole idea also of looking at this is the rapporteur's recommendations. We need to realize those rapporteur recommendations, because after that report was written, you got a lot of attention, and then those reports go up on the shelves, but they're still so rich in a way of really providing a roadmap on how we can realize human rights in our country.
And I think the other part that's really exciting about the work that I do, which makes it a little different, is that I've been able to work with scholars in human rights and actually write peer-reviewed papers that have been published, like in the Columbia University Human Rights Review. I've been able to write with Inga and with Joanne, and it's been published. Since that time, we've even had we've had briefings on Capitol Hill based on the papers that we've written about wastewater problems around the country. So all of this emanated from us using the human rights approach, and we still do that. So there are students that are working with us right now at Columbia University who are using the human rights approach. And other communities that we're going to, we're telling them to do the same thing. We're actually sharing our experiences with them. And when we can't work with them directly, we're connecting them with other people that are doing this work, so they can also use and understand and use this approach as well to try to solve those issues in their communities.
Perfect. Any other questions? If not, I was going to ask you, maybe if you could share briefly some ideas you have around the MacArthur Foundation ideas, and then also next steps and how you're still going to work on this issue of right to water and sanitation. And you also brought up something that's unique, and that is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I know throughout the country, I know here in Hawaii, we did a voluntary local review of VLR with all 4 municipalities coming together, and we use the human rights lens with those 17 global goals. And I know at the U.S. Human Rights Network, there's been 1 or 2 people trying to bring up more awareness around the SDGs as well. I don't know how that might lead into future advocacy of things that you're working on expanding and coordinating? Because I know most of the issues we know are climate justice, environmental justice, and linking them all together.
Well, I think that at least for us, we're going to continue to document and write about these issues using the human rights lens. But we plan to expand. You know, initially we were focusing on Lowndes County. Now we're focusing on areas around the U.S. And then ultimately, you know, with the funds from the MacArthur Foundation, I like to also show that this is a global problem and go to other countries. I mean, some of these places was very interesting. Is some of the places, someone sent me pictures recently of lagoons in Lagos, Nigeria. You know, and they were talking about building a sewage lagoon. They were talking about building a sewage lagoon next to a school in Lowndes County, Alabama. That's kind of technology they were talking about using here in the U.S., which is the most basic type of technology to treat wastewater. So what we're also going to be doing is working, I will be partnering with universities and other collaborators to work on technological solutions. But the difference is that we like to bring to the table these communities, representatives of these communities that are dealing with the problem, who can work with engineers and using the human rights and environmental justice framework for addressing these issues.
Really good point. And I think that's the side too, is one of the things I've noticed from the work that we do together is we really educate each other a lot, because everyone is really experts in the work that they do. And even being with you for a short time period, I know it alerted me that anytime I see wastewater anywhere in Hawaii, I'm always sending you an email. And the Surfrider Foundation is having an event just this week. And I was like, this is exactly what we have to concentrate on. And I think the other point that might come out of the Universal Periodic Review, as well as hosting Special Rapporteur, is that getting ideas from each other is when you're sharing your ideas, then you meet others who have similar situations. And a lot of times people dealing with similar situations can identify the promising practices and see if that could be then brought over, and those simple steps could be shared with one another, and if that can be scaled up. I don't know if there's some examples you've seen around the issues that you work on that have been able to make advances and help.
Well, one of the places that we're working with, because we also have an organization, the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, and part of our framework is to coalesce and collaborate with other organizations that have skills we don't have to expand our capacity to address these problems. And as a result, one of the groups that we work with is Earth Justice. So Earth Justice actually did an article about what was happening in Lowndes County, because we've actually filed a complaint with the government entity about the health department and how it addressed the report when it came out. Our report came out about hookworm. They pushed back and said that it was not valid, it's not true, and so forth and so on. So anyway, we were able to, with our work with Earth Justice, deal with that using the legal framework that's in place. So they did a story about it. And as a result of them doing a story, then another community up north reached out to them that was having wastewater problems. And they went to visit, and they called me and told me about it. And I went to visit as well. I actually write about it in my book. And I saw as much raw sewage there as I've seen in Lowndes County, and what was so fascinating about it to me was that this is the community that was very close to St. Louis, you know, an urban area, but it was actually in Illinois. And what they're doing now is using the human rights framework to address the problem there as well. And I think that what we're going to see around the country, that a lot of people, a lot of activists on the ground are going to be incorporating the human rights framework as they try to address these issues.
I think too, it just continues to grow when people see the potential and the power of the human rights lens. Are there any other questions? I know we're getting close to our time, but I really want to thank Catherine for making time and sharing her story, and definitely can't wait to read the book, especially that chapter, to see it all encapsulated on how you were able to go from writing a letter to inviting a rapporteur to hosting, and then being able to go from the ground then to Geneva. And then what I really think is powerful as well, Catherine, is when grassroots activists go to Geneva, they don't just get caught up with how interesting it was. Everyone knows it's just one more leverage point to be able to then put moral and public pressure back home to improve the situation. All right, any questions? If not, Catherine, any closing comments you'd like to share with us?
Sorry.
Penelope, do you have a question or?
It actually cut off and came back on, but I hope you all can edit this.
Yeah, no, I wonder what happened there. Penelope, did you have a question? I saw you pop up, but if not, no problem. Okay, we just got to thank you. So Catherine, like I said, thank you so much for making time and coming to share your story. And I do look forward to reading the book, that chapter on the Special Rapporteur and where that has led, and look forward to continue partnering with you to make sure that this issue is definitely dealt with and that we focus on it from all angles to make sure that we can eliminate extreme poverty and human rights, and most importantly, look at this issue of water as a human right for all people in the US and around the world. So thank you so much though for making time. There is one thing I would like to share. Let me do that very quickly. I want to, since this is, let me see, I'll just see, Mary, if she can add me there real quick. We have an outline of the entire time of what we'll be doing leading up until November 9th. So if Mary can allow that, perfect. I think she's gonna.
I'm trying to do it right now. For some reason, it's not responding well, but I'm going to try right now.
But we have an outline of the entire rest of the month of what's happening. And so one of the people on Neus did this amazing chart for our first draft of activities and where we'll be going.
I'm very sorry that I'm having this technical difficulty. For some reason, it, all right, try now, Josh.
Okay, let me give it a go. Perfect, thank you so much.
Yes.
So here we go. This is what we wanted to coordinate. What we thought was so important was tomorrow is 1 month countdown. So we thought this was so crucial to have this event the day before. And this is our Truth to Power Thursdays. And we started them a couple of weeks ago. And the theme we were doing this week was Realize Rapporteur Recommendations. So Catherine, I know when you met with the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, that report he gave had a lot of really good recommendations. So we really thought it was great for you to speak today. And then it was the final event before tomorrow, which is Read My Recommendation Day. So we know with the UPR, the main thing that we're doing is making sure that we're asking those governments to take the recommendations that the people have drafted in their stakeholder report, but also in their 1 to 2 pagers. And then make sure that on November 9th, in that 3.5 hour review, that they take our recommendations from the people on the ground and then read them. And then October 12th, that's right around Eleanor Roosevelt's birthday. That's Here Are Human Rights. And that's asking people to take a picture in their community where they are with people, family members who have rights have been violated, to say, here are human rights, and look at the different articles of the UDHR and highlight human rights around the country and our communities. October 19th, we've had a small change. We're excited. Finally, the US did release the report. It was going to be released, the US report, because the US had not released its report. They have, and it's definitely something that we should read, the US report, because you wouldn't believe what it says. On environmental issues, since you're on, Catherine, before they mention the environment, they talk about energy security, and then they talk about economic prosperity. And then, oh yeah, environment. So it's definitely, when you read the US report, you can see how it is lacking the human rights focus. And we're gonna also add a new hashtag after you read the US report to stand up and say what USA. On October 28th, it's gonna be Stand with US Civil Society. We're asking the world right before the US election to stand with us, because we can see from all the indicators that it is gonna be quite an election without one party agreeing to the peaceful transfer of power. And then on November 2nd, which is on the eve of the election, it's going to be Read My Recommendations. And what we'll be doing throughout that entire week is having activities and events with UN missions to share with them about what we feel are the recommendations that should be the core of that review. Right now, working groups are reaching out to UN missions. We're creating serpentine sessions, small meetings, such as where you have many meetings as well, Catherine, in Geneva, in that serpentine lounge. We're having virtual serpentine sessions with missions that care about specific issues. So we're matching up people on the ground who are working with your example of water and sanitation with the governments in Geneva who care the most about those issues, and then working together to draft the best recommendations and questions to be posed to the US during the UPR. And so that's an overview. We liberated the 2020 a bit from John Bon Jovi's new album. I have to thank Stephen Colbert for putting that up. And then we added the cool UPR and USA in the zeros. And I want to thank Neus for making that design. But that is the format that we'll be going through. And we wish everyone an exciting month that we'll be on. And next week, we'll have Eric Tars talking about the right to housing. And then we'll continue going throughout the time before the UPR of the United States. And of course, as we all know, the actual consideration, and we're calling this the countdown to consideration, that 3.5-hour review is really just the beginning, because we'll have to push the US government to be able to make sure that they accept the recommendations at the next Human Rights Council meeting in February and March. And then we work towards that final phase beyond the adoption towards implementation. And that's really where Catherine's been working, and many people on this call are also working on, but that's where we'll focus on how to implement those recommendations that'll come out of the UPR. So we definitely want to thank everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Catherine, for making time. And congratulations again on the MacArthur. And we look forward to partnering more into the future. Mahalo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.